Admiral Zektoth looked at the images with horror. When will it arrive? The crystals calculated based on the entity's movement through space. Approximately 50 Earth years, Lisa translated. Then we have time to prepare, Jake said. But we'll need to work together. Humans can't face this threat alone, and neither can any other single species. Kethvara was studying her readings of the awakened humans. The genetic activation is still spreading. By our calculations, within 1 Earth year, most of your species will have access to at least some predecessor abilities. That's what we're afraid of, Carlos admitted. What if the newly awakened humans can't control their power? What if they use it for evil? The crystals showed them the solution. The awakened humans could serve as teachers and guides for those who came after them. By sharing the knowledge of predecessor history and the importance of wisdom, they could help ensure that humanity's return to power would be different from the first time. We propose a partnership, Lisa Shaw said to the Zephyrians. You help us prepare our people for their awakening, and we help you prepare the galaxy for the greater threat that's coming. Admiral Zektoth considered the offer. The Zephyrians had always seen themselves as the galaxy's leading scientists and explorers, but they had never faced anything like the cosmic entity shown in the crystal records. They needed the predecessor's power, but they also needed assurance that this power would be used responsibly. What guarantees can you give us? The Admiral asked. None, Lisa replied honestly. We can't guarantee that every human will choose wisdom over power. But we can promise that we'll try our best to teach them, and we can promise that we remember what happened the last time our people let power corrupt them. Dr. Velthar stepped forward. I believe them, he said to the Admiral. In all our historical research, we've never found evidence that the original predecessors understood the consequences of their actions. These humans do. They've seen the results of the ancient war, and they're choosing a different path. The Admiral made his decision. Very well. We accept your partnership, but we'll need to inform the other galactic civilizations about what's happening. They have a right to know that the predecessors are returning. Of course, Jake agreed. Transparency will be important if we're going to build trust across the galaxy. Over the following months, the partnership between humans and Zephyrians grew stronger. The aliens shared their advanced technology and scientific knowledge, while the awakening humans shared their growing understanding of predecessor abilities and cosmic threats. Centers for awakening guidance were established around Earth, staffed by the original 43 awakened humans and teams of Zephyrian scientists. As more humans began to access their genetic heritage, they were taught not just how to use their new abilities, but why those abilities came with enormous responsibility. The process wasn't perfect. Some newly awakened humans did try to use their power for personal gain or to harm others. But the guidance centers were able to help most of them understand the bigger picture and choose a better path. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians carried news of humanity's return to civilizations across the site. The reactions were mixed. Some species were terrified, others were hopeful, and a few were skeptical. But as the cosmic entity continued its slow approach toward their galaxy, more and more civilizations realized that they would need the predecessor's help to survive. Commander Lisa Shaw stood on a hill overlooking the Nevada facility, now expanded into a sprawling complex where humans and aliens worked together to prepare for the challenges ahead. In the distance, she could see spacecraft from a dozen different worlds, all united in the common goal of defending their galaxy. Do you think we'll be ready in time? Asked Jake Martinez, joining her on the hill. I think we have to be, Lisa replied. Our ancestors made the choice to give up their power and start over as a primitive species. Now it's our turn to make a choice. We can either repeat their mistakes, or we can prove that the millions of years of evolution and learning were worth it. Far above them, human and alien scientists worked together to decode the deepest layers of human DNA. What they found there were not just genetic instructions for incredible abilities, but also warnings and guidance left by the original predecessors. The ancient race had hoped that their descendants would be wiser, kinder, and stronger than they had been. Looking at the cooperation between species in the facility below, Lisa believed that hope was being fulfilled. Humanity was returning to its place among the stars, but this time, they would not walk that path alone. The galaxy was about to face its greatest test, but for the first time in millions of years, it would face that test united. And at the center of that unity were the children of Earth, the predecessors reborn, carrying the wisdom of ages and the power to reshape reality itself. The stars were no longer empty, and they never would be again. The Zephyrian fleet arrived at Earth 8 days later, just as Admiral Zektoth had ordered. The 5 massive ships took positions around the planet, their advanced sensors immediately detecting that the human awakening was accelerating. "Sir," reported the fleet's science officer, "we're detecting genetic activation in over 10,000 humans now, and the number is growing every hour." Admiral Zektoth studied the readings with growing alarm. "Can they detect us?" "Unknown, sir. According to our historical data, the predecessors had abilities that we don't fully understand." The Admiral was about to order a deeper scan when something impossible happened. A voice spoke directly into his mind, clear and calm despite traveling across the vacuum of space. "Zephyrian Fleet, this is Commander Lisa Shaw of Earth. We know. You're here, and we'd like to talk." Every Zephyrian on all 5 ships heard the voice at the same time. Admiral Zektoth looked at his communication officer in shock. "How is she doing that? We're in cloaked ships. They shouldn't be able to detect us, let alone communicate with us." "I don't know, sir," the officer replied. "Our systems show no incoming transmissions." Lisa's voice came again, patient and understanding. "We're not using your technology to talk to you. This is one of our inherited abilities. Please don't be afraid. We want to help each other." In the crystal chamber beneath the Nevada desert, Lisa Shaw stood with her hand on one of the large crystals. Her mind was connected to the network of awakened humans around the world, and through them, she could reach across space to touch the thoughts of the alien visitors. "They're terrified," Lisa told the other awakened humans. "They think we're going to become the same destructive force that nearly destroyed the galaxy millions of years ago." "Maybe we will," said Carlos Rivera. "Look at human history. We've never had this kind of power before. How do we know we won't use it to hurt people?" Jake Martinez had been studying the crystal images for hours, learning about the ancient civilization that humans had once been. "Because we have something the original predecessors didn't have," he said. "We have the memory of their mistakes." Ben Torres, who had been quietly communing with the natural world through his enhanced abilities, looked up from his meditation. "The Earth itself is trying to teach us wisdom. Every living thing on this planet is connected, and we're starting to feel that connection. The old predecessors lost touch with that unity." Admiral Zektoth finally responded to Lisa's mental communication. "Human Shaw, this is Admiral Zektoth of the Zephyrian Research Fleet. We request permission to meet with your representatives." "Of course," Lisa replied. "We invite you to join us at our location in the Nevada desert. We have much to show you." Several hours later, a small Zephyrian shuttle landed near George Hayes's house. Admiral Zektoth emerged with Dr. Velthar and Kethvara, along with a small security team. The aliens were clearly nervous as they approached the group of awakened humans. "Welcome to Earth," Lisa Shaw said, stepping forward to greet them. "Thank you for coming." Dr. Velthar studied Lisa with his large black eyes. "You are not what we expected," he said. "The historical records describe the predecessors as beings of immense power and arrogance. You seem different." "We are different," Jake Martinez replied. "We've had millions of years to learn and grow as a species. We've made mistakes, but we've also learned from them." Kethvara was scanning the awakened humans with a handheld device. "Their genetic activation levels are off our measurement scales," she whispered to Velthar. "Some of them are more advanced than the most powerful predecessor artifacts we've ever found. But we're choosing not to use that power for destruction," said Amanda Clark. "We want to use it to help." The Zephyrians followed the humans down into the crystal chamber. When they saw the holographic records of predecessor history, Admiral Zektoth sat down heavily on a stone bench. "It's all true," he said. "The legends, the warnings, everything. You really are the predecessors returned to the galaxy." "Yes," Lisa said, "but we don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. We've seen what happens when power is used without wisdom." Dr. Velthar was studying the crystal recordings of the ancient war. "According to these images, the original predecessors faced a cosmic threat that forced them to develop their destructive capabilities. The threat is still out there, waiting between the galaxies. The crystals responded to his interest, projecting new images that showed the space between galaxies. In that vast emptiness, something ancient and hungry was stirring. The entity fed on the life force of entire civilizations, and it had been slowly growing stronger while the galaxy remained unprotected. This is why the predecessors scattered themselves, Ben Torres realized. They knew that someday this entity would return, and the galaxy would need defenders who were both powerful and wise. The Zephyrian High Council received Dr. Velthar's emergency message and immediately sent their most advanced research fleet toward Earth. 5 massive ships, each one twice the size of the Silent Observer, began the journey across the galaxy. The fleet was led by Admiral Zektoth, the most experienced military commander in Zephyrian history. "How long until we reach the human world?" Admiral Zektoth asked his navigation officer. "At maximum speed, 12 days, sir," the officer replied. "Make it 8 days," the admiral ordered. "I have a feeling we don't have much time." Back on Earth, the awakened humans were arriving at the Nevada desert location. Dr. Jake Martinez was the first to reach the area, driving his truck across the dusty roads until he found the small house where George Hayes lived. George was sitting on his front porch when Jake arrived. The old man looked at Jake with knowing eyes, as if he had been expecting him. "You're one of them, aren't you?" George asked. "One of the people who are changing." "How did you know?" Jake replied, surprised. "Because my family has been waiting for people like you for over 100 years, George said. "My great-great-grandfather told us that someday special people would come here looking for something. He said we had to be ready to help them when they arrived." Over the next 2 days, more awakened humans arrived. Commander Lisa Shaw came from the east, driving a rented car filled with her notebooks of impossible equations. Amanda Clark arrived on a bus, carrying electrical equipment that she had somehow known she would need. Carlos Rivera came in his work truck, loaded with construction tools. Pete Johnson flew in from New York, and Ben Torres drove down from Montana. By the end of the week, 43 people had gathered at George's house. They came from all walks of life: scientists, teachers, construction workers, farmers, doctors, and even a few teenagers who had felt the same calling. What they all had in common was the strange new abilities that were growing stronger every day. "I don't understand what's happening to us," said Dr. Martinez as the group sat around a campfire behind George's house. "But I know we're supposed to be here." "We all feel it," agreed Commander Shaw. "There's something under the ground here, something that's calling to us." George Hayes had been listening to their conversation. Finally, he stood up and walked toward his house. "Follow me," he said. "It's time to show you what my family has been guarding." George led the group to what looked like an old storm cellar behind his house. But when he opened the heavy metal door, they saw stairs leading down much deeper than any normal cellar would go. "This goes down about 200 feet, George explained as they descended the stairs. "My family built the house over it, but we didn't build what's down there. That was already here when my great-great-grandfather bought this land." The stairs ended at a massive underground chamber carved from solid rock. The chamber was filled with tall crystal structures that gave off a soft blue light. The crystals were arranged in perfect patterns, creating pathways between them like the aisles of a vast library. "What is this place?" whispered Amanda Clark. "I think it's what we've been looking for," Jake Martinez replied. As the awakened humans entered the chamber, the crystals began to glow brighter. The light seemed to respond to their presence, growing stronger as they moved deeper into the underground space. Ben Torres walked up to one of the crystals and placed his hand on its surface. Immediately, the crystal projected a 3-dimensional image into the air above it. The image showed a planet that looked like Earth, but different. The continents were in different positions, and the oceans were different colors. "That's Earth," said Lisa Shaw, studying the image. "But from millions of years ago." More crystals activated as the other awakened humans touched them. Soon, the entire chamber was filled with holographic images showing the history of Earth and other worlds. But these were not the histories that humans had learned in school. The images showed a great civilization that had once existed across the galaxy. The people in the images looked human, but they had abilities that seemed like magic. They could travel between stars without ships, control the weather with their minds, and create technology that was beyond the understanding of current science. These are the predecessors, Jake said, remembering the visions he had seen when touching the ocean metal. The ancient race that all the old legends talk about. One crystal showed images that made everyone in the chamber stop and stare. The images showed the great civilization at war with itself. Planets were destroyed. Stars were extinguished, and entire solar systems were torn apart by forces that the predecessors had unleashed. They were destroying everything, Amanda said, horrified by what she was seeing. The final images showed the predecessors making an incredible decision. Rather than continue their destructive war, they chose to give up their advanced civilization entirely. They scattered themselves across the galaxy, changing their bodies and minds to become primitive beings on thousands of different worlds. They became us, Lisa whispered. Humans are the predecessors, reborn as a simpler species. The crystals showed more images explaining the plan. The predecessors had built genetic locks into their new forms, preventing them from accessing their old knowledge and abilities until they had learned wisdom to go with their power. The locks were designed to open slowly, over millions of years, as the scattered peoples evolved and matured. But something has gone wrong, Ben said. We're awakening. Too fast, too early. One of the crystals projected an image of the Zephyrian ship and its deep scan of human DNA. The scan had damaged the genetic locks, causing them to open thousands of years ahead of schedule. The alien scan triggered our awakening, Jake realized. They didn't mean to, but they broke the system that was supposed to keep our abilities hidden until we were ready. George Hayes, who had been quietly watching everything, finally spoke. My family's job was to guard this place until you were ready to find it. My great-great-grandfather said that when the special people came, we would know that something big was about to happen in the world. The crystals continued to show images, but now they were showing the present and the future. The awakening was spreading to more humans every day. Soon, thousands and then millions of people would begin to access their predecessor abilities. What does this mean for the world? Carlos asked. The crystals showed two possible futures. In one future, humans awakened with wisdom and used their abilities to help heal the galaxy and protect it from cosmic threats that were still out there, waiting, in the darkness between stars. In the other future, humans awakened with the same destructive impulses that had nearly destroyed the galaxy millions of years ago. The choice is ours, Lisa said. We can repeat the mistakes of the past, or we can learn from them. But we're not ready, Amanda protested. Humanity isn't wise enough to handle this kind of power. Look at our wars, our pollution, our hatred for each other. The crystals showed one more image, the Zephyrian fleet approaching Earth. The aliens were terrified of what humanity might become, but they were also desperately hoping that the awakened humans would choose wisdom over destruction. They're coming to stop us, Ben said. No, Jake corrected, studying the images more carefully. They're coming to help us, if we'll let them. They're as scared as we are, but they know that the galaxy needs the predecessors to return. There are threats out there that none of the current civilizations can handle alone. The awakened humans looked at each other, realizing the enormous responsibility that had been placed on their shoulders. They were the first humans to learn the truth about their species, and the choices they made in the next few days would determine the fate of the entire galaxy. Outside, George Hayes looked up at the stars, knowing that very soon, those stars would no longer be empty. The galaxy was about to change forever, and it all started with a few dozen humans in a crystal chamber beneath the Nevada desert. 2 weeks after the Zephyrians sent their emergency message, strange things were happening to people all over Earth. The changes were still small, but they were spreading to more and more humans every day. Carlos Rivera was a construction worker in Los Angeles. He had been building houses and office buildings for 15 years, and he thought he knew everything about construction work. But on this Tuesday morning, something was different. Carlos was working on a new office building when he touched one of the steel beams. Suddenly, his mind filled with information about the building's structure. He could see every bolt, every wire, every pipe inside the walls. More than that, he could understand exactly how everything worked together. "Hey, Rodriguez," Carlos called to his supervisor. "This building has a problem. The electrical system in the north wall is going to fail in about 6 months." "How can you know that?" Rodriguez asked. The electrical work was just inspected last week. Everything passed. But Carlos was right. When the electricians opened up the north wall, they found that the wires were installed incorrectly. If they hadn't fixed the problem, the building could have caught fire. How did you know? Rodriguez asked Carlos later. Carlos didn't know how to answer. He had just touched the building and somehow understood everything about it. This wasn't normal, and it was scaring him. Across the country in Ohio, high school science teacher Amanda Clark was having her own strange experiences. Amanda had always been good with electronics, but now she could do things that seemed impossible. During her lunch break, Amanda was fixing a broken computer in the school's computer lab. When she touched the machine, she could feel the electricity flowing through all the circuits. She could sense exactly where the problem was without even opening the computer case. "The hard drive is failing," she told the school's IT technician. "But that's not the real problem. There's a surge in the power supply that's going to damage 3 more computers if you don't fix it today." The IT technician thought Amanda was crazy, but he checked anyway. She was completely right. The power supply was sending too much electricity to several computers. If he hadn't fixed it that day, the school would have lost thousands of dollars worth of equipment. That night, Amanda stood in her backyard and held up her hands. She could feel the electrical field that surrounded the earth. She could sense every power line in her neighborhood, every electronic device in nearby houses. The sensation was overwhelming, but also amazing. "What's happening to me?" she whispered to herself. In New York City, retired firefighter Pete Johnson was walking past a tall apartment building when he stopped suddenly. Something was wrong with the building, but he couldn't see what it was. The building looked normal from the outside, but Pete could sense that it was in danger. Pete walked around the building, touching the walls with his hands. Images filled his mind, showing him the inside structure of the building. He could see that several support beams on the 5th floor were cracked and ready to break. "This building is going to collapse," Pete said to himself. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon." Pete called the city's building inspector and tried to explain what he had sensed. The inspector didn't believe him at first, but Pete wouldn't give up. Finally, the inspector agreed to check the building. When they looked at the 5th floor, they found exactly what Pete had described. The support beams were badly damaged. If they hadn't been repaired immediately, the entire building could have fallen down, killing hundreds of people. "How did you know?" the inspector asked Pete. "I wish I could tell you," Pete replied, "but I honestly don't know." Dr. Jake Martinez was still studying the strange metal pieces in his laboratory. Every day, the visions in his mind became clearer and stronger. He could see ancient underwater cities filled with technology that was millions of years ahead of anything humans had ever built. In his visions, Jake saw machines that could control the weather, devices that could heal any injury, and vehicles that could travel between the stars in the blink of an eye. Most amazingly, he was starting to understand how these machines worked. Jake began drawing pictures of the devices he saw in his visions. His drawings showed machines with impossible designs, but somehow Jake knew that every line and curve was exactly right. Commander Lisa Shaw was having similar experiences. The mathematical equations that filled her mind were becoming more complex every day. She had filled dozens of notebooks with formulas that described how to manipulate space and time. Lisa knew that these equations were beyond current human understanding, but she also knew they were correct. She could feel the truth of them in her mind, like memories from a dream she couldn't quite remember. "Where is this knowledge coming from?" Lisa asked herself as she filled another page with equations that shouldn't exist. The most affected person was Ben Torres, the park ranger who had been taken by the aliens. Ben's connection to nature was growing stronger every day. He could communicate with animals in ways that seemed magical. Deer would come when he called them. Birds would land on his shoulders and seem to listen when he spoke. More than that, Ben could sense the health of entire forests. He could feel which areas needed more water, which trees were diseased, and where the soil was becoming too polluted. He was becoming like a guardian of the natural world. On the alien ship, the Zephyrians were monitoring these changes with growing terror. Their long-distance sensors could detect the genetic activations happening in humans around the world. "How many humans are showing signs of activation?" Dr. Velthar asked Kethvara. Based on our scans, less than 1/100% of the population, Kethvara replied. But even that small number represents thousands of individuals. And what are they capable of? The activated humans are displaying abilities that surpass most known galactic civilizations. They can understand complex technology by touch, sense energy patterns, and manipulate their environment in ways that should be impossible for their species. Velthar felt sick. The Zephyrians had always believed they were among the most advanced species in the galaxy. But these awakening humans were already showing abilities that the Zephyrians could never match. "Sir," Morthek called from his station, "I'm detecting something else. The activated humans seem to be finding each other. They're drawn together by some kind of shared consciousness." This was true. Across the Earth, the people who were experiencing changes were having the same dreams. In these dreams, they saw a place in the American desert, a location that called to them like a voice from their past. Dr. Martinez left his laboratory in California and began driving east. Commander Shaw left her home in Florida and started traveling west. Amanda Clark took a leave of absence from her teaching job and began a journey toward Nevada. Carlos Rivera, Pete Johnson, Ben Torres, and dozens of others were all traveling toward the same place, drawn by instincts they didn't understand. They were all heading toward an abandoned military facility in the Nevada desert, a place that had been forgotten by the government but never truly empty. For generations, it had been watched over by a family that didn't understand why their ancestors had told them to guard this place. George Hayes lived alone in a small house near the facility. His great-great-grandfather had built the house and told his children to never leave the area. For over 100 years, the Hayes family had lived near the facility, maintaining it without knowing why. George was 67 years old and had spent his entire life wondering why his family felt compelled to stay in this lonely desert location. But now, as he watched strange people arriving from all over the country, he was beginning to understand that his family had been waiting for something that was finally ready to be found. The awakened humans were gathering, drawn by genetic memories that stretched back millions of years. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, ancient machines were beginning to respond to their presence. Soon, the truth about humanity's real nature would be revealed. And when that happened, both humans and aliens would learn that Earth's people were not the primitive species everyone believed them to be. They were something far more powerful and far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. 3 weeks had passed since the silent observer left Earth's solar system. The ship was now studying a different star system, looking at planets covered in ice and gas. Kethvara had almost forgotten about the human samples until her computer made a sound that she had never heard before. The sound was loud and urgent, like an alarm. Kethvara ran to her computer and saw red warning lights flashing on the screen. The computer was having trouble with something, but she didn't understand. "What? Morthek, come here quickly," she called to her assistant. "Something is wrong with the DNA analysis." Morthek hurried over and looked at the screen. His large black eyes grew even wider when he saw the display. "The computer is overheating, but that's impossible. Our computers can analyze any biological data without problems. Run the analysis again," Kethvara ordered. Maybe there was an error in the system. The computer ran the human DNA analysis a second time, then a third time, then a fourth time. Each time the same thing happened. The computer would start working normally, but then it would slow down and overheat. After 17 attempts, Kethvara finally looked at the results. What she saw made her blood turn cold. The human DNA was not normal at all. Hidden inside the genetic code were patterns that didn't match anything in their vast database. These patterns were incredibly complex, more complex than the DNA of any species the Zephyrians had ever discovered. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that most of the human genetic code appeared to be turned off, locked away like information stored in a vault. It was as if someone had taken enormous amounts of genetic data and compressed it, hiding it deep inside the human genome. "This can't be right," Kethvara whispered. "No species develops this way. Genetic codes don't have locked sections. This looks like it was designed by someone." Morthek was staring at his own screen, looking at different parts of the human DNA. "Kethvara, you need to see this. Some of these genetic patterns I think I recognize them. What do you mean you recognize them? From my studies in school. These patterns are similar to the old stories, the legends about the predecessors. Kethvara felt her heart beating faster. Every Zephyrian child learned about the predecessors in school, but they were taught that the stories were just myths. The predecessors were supposed to be an ancient race that lived millions of years ago, before any of the current galactic civilizations existed. The predecessors are just stories, Kethvara said, but her voice was shaking. Old legends to teach children about history. But what if they're not just stories? Morthek asked. What if the predecessors were real? And what if humans are connected to them somehow? Kethvara immediately called Dr. Velthar to the lab. When the chief scientist arrived, she showed him the DNA analysis results. Velthar studied the data for a long time without saying anything. His face became more and more worried as he looked at the genetic patterns. I need to check something, Velthar said finally. He went to the ship's main database and searched for information about predecessor, ruins and artifacts. He had studied these ruins on other planets, but he had always thought they were just the remains of some extinct civilization. After an hour of searching, Velthar found what he was looking for. In the ruins on the planet Zerion Prime, archaeologists had found genetic fragments carved into ancient stones. Velthar compared these fragments to the human DNA patterns. They matched perfectly. This is impossible, Velthar said, but the evidence was right there on his screen. According to our historical records, the predecessors disappeared millions of years ago. But these humans, their DNA contains predecessor genetic codes. What does this mean? Kethvara asked. I don't know, Velthar admitted, but I'm starting to think we've made a terrible mistake. When we scanned that human, we may have triggered something that was supposed to stay hidden. Back on Earth, strange things were beginning to happen to people around the world. But these changes were so small that most people didn't notice them at first. Dr. Jake Martinez was in his lab, still trying to understand the glowing metal pieces he had found on the ocean floor. He had run every test he could think of, but the metal didn't behave like any known material. When he touched it, though, something strange happened. Images flashed through his mind. Images of vast underwater cities with technology beyond anything humans had ever built. That's impossible, Jake said to himself. I must be imagining things. But the images kept coming back every time he touched the metal. He saw machines that could control the ocean currents and buildings that could withstand the crushing pressure of the deepest water. Most strangely, he understood how these machines worked, even though the technology was completely unknown to human science. Commander Lisa Shaw had returned to Earth from the space station, but she couldn't stop thinking about the energy readings she had detected. Every night, she found herself drawing complex mathematical equations in her notebook. She had never seen these equations before, and she didn't understand where they were coming from. The equations described things that current human science said were impossible: how to bend space, how to travel faster than light, how to generate energy from the fabric of reality itself. Lisa knew she should be excited about these discoveries, but instead she felt frightened. How could she know things that no human was supposed to know? Ben Torres, the park ranger who had been taken by the aliens, was having the strangest experience of all. When he walked through the forest, he could sense things that weren't visible to his eyes. He could feel the underground water flowing beneath his feet. He could sense which trees were healthy and which were sick. Most surprisingly, he could feel some kind of energy connecting all living things in the forest. I must be losing my mind, Ben said to his friend and fellow ranger, Charlie Watson, after describing his new abilities. Maybe you should see a doctor, Charlie suggested. You've been acting strange since that camping trip 3 weeks ago. But Ben knew he wasn't sick. His mind felt clearer than it had ever felt before. The problem was that he was seeing and feeling things that no normal person should be able to detect. On the alien ship, Dr. Velthar was reading through more ancient texts about the predecessors. What he found made him feel sick with worry. According to the oldest records, the predecessors hadn't just disappeared. They had faced some kind of great crisis that forced them to make an impossible choice. The texts were damaged and hard to read, but Velthar could make out enough words to understand the basic message. The inheritors sleep in distant stars. Do not wake them before their time. for they are the children of fire and void, and they will reclaim what was always theirs. Kethvara, Velthar called out. Send an emergency message to the High Council immediately. Tell them we need help, and we need it now. What should I tell them? Kethvara asked. Tell them that we haven't discovered humans, Velthar said, his voice filled with fear. Tell them that we have awakened them. The message was sent across the galaxy at faster-than-light speed, racing toward the Zephyrian homeworld. But even at the speed of light, it would take time for help to arrive. And with each passing day, more humans were beginning to change. The DNA locks that had kept humanity's true nature hidden for millions of years were starting to break. Soon, the sleeping giants would wake up completely, and when they did, the galaxy would learn why the predecessors had been both feared and respected by every civilization that had ever existed. The terror was just beginning. Far beyond the planet Pluto, a large alien ship floated in the cold darkness of space. The ship was called the Silent Observer, and it belonged to a race called the Zephyrians. These aliens were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. They were very smart, but their bodies were weak and fragile. Kethvara stood in the ship's main lab, looking at a screen that showed planet Earth. She was the lead scientist on this mission. Her job was to study new worlds and the creatures that lived on them. She had done this work for many years, and had studied hundreds of planets. Another primitive world, she said to her assistant Morthek. Look at them down there. They still fight wars with metal weapons and burn fuel to travel. They haven't even learned to travel between stars yet. Morthek nodded as he looked at the data on his screen. The planet is called Earth by its people. They call themselves humans. Our long-distance scans show they are carbon-based life forms, just like most species we find. Nothing special about them. On Earth, Dr. Jake Martinez was having the best day of his work life. He was a marine biologist, which meant he studied ocean life. Today, he was deep under the Pacific Ocean in a small submarine with his team. They were looking for new types of fish and plants that lived in the deep, dark water. Dr. Martinez, you need to see this, called out his partner, Dr. Susan Hayes. She was pointing at something on the ocean floor through the submarine's thick glass window. Jake looked where she was pointing. There, half buried in the mud, were pieces of metal that looked very strange. The metal was silver but seemed to glow with its own light. It was shaped in ways that didn't look like anything humans had ever made. That's not from any ship I know, Jake said. The shapes are too smooth, too perfect. And look how it glows. I've never seen metal do that before. High above the Earth, Commander Lisa Shaw was floating inside the International Space Station. She was an astronaut who had been in space for 3 months. Today was supposed to be a normal day of running tests and checking equipment. But something was wrong with her instruments. Houston, we have a problem up here, Lisa said into her radio. I'm getting energy readings that don't make sense. There's something out there past Pluto, something big. The voice from Earth crackled through her radio. Lisa, please check your equipment. Our telescopes don't show anything unusual in that area. Lisa looked at her screens again. The readings were still there. Something was definitely out there. Something that was giving off energy patterns she had never seen before. She made notes in her logbook, but she didn't understand what she was seeing. Back on the alien ship, Dr. Velthar, the chief scientist, walked into the lab where Kethvara was working. Velthar was older than the others and had studied more planets than anyone else on the ship. Have you made your decision about the Earth creatures? Velthar asked. Yes, Kethvara replied. I want to collect some samples. We need to get a closer look at their biology. Based on what we can see from here, they seem like a normal developing species. I'll classify them as Category 7, developing intelligence, no threat level. Good. Take a sample, do the tests, and let's move on to the next system. We have many more worlds to study. That night on Earth, Ben Torres was camping alone in Yellowstone National Park. Ben was a park ranger who loved spending his free time in nature. He had set up his tent near a quiet lake, far from other people. The stars were bright, and the air was clean and cold. Ben was sitting by his small campfire, drinking coffee and looking at the stars, when he saw a strange light moving across the sky. It was too fast to be an airplane and too quiet to be a helicopter. The light seemed to be getting bigger, coming closer. What in the world is that? Ben said to himself. The light stopped moving and hung in the air above the trees. Ben felt very sleepy all of a sudden. His eyes became heavy, and he couldn't keep them open. The last thing he remembered was the strange light getting brighter and brighter. Ben woke up in his tent the next morning feeling confused and tired. He looked at his watch and saw that it was already noon. He never slept that late, especially when camping. His head hurt, and he felt like he had forgotten something important, but he couldn't remember what. High above, the silent observer was moving away from Earth. In the ship's medical bay, Kethvara was looking at the samples they had taken from the sleeping human. The tests had been quick and simple. They had scanned the human's body, taken some blood and skin samples, and recorded his DNA patterns. The specimen appeared to be a healthy adult male. Kethvara told Morthek as she prepared the samples for deep analysis. Standard carbon-based biology, nothing unusual. The DNA structure looks normal for this type of life form. She placed the samples into the ship's main computer system for detailed analysis. The computer would break down every part of the human DNA and compare it to the millions of other species in their database. How long will the full analysis take? Morthek asked. About 3 weeks, Kethvara replied. The computer needs to check every genetic sequence and map the entire biological structure. But based on what I saw during the examination, I expect we'll find nothing surprising. Just another primitive species that will take thousands of years to develop space travel. She filed her initial report, classifying humans as harmless and not worth further study. The Zephyrians had seen thousands of species like this before. They were always the same, young races that had barely learned to use fire and metal, let alone understand the secrets of the universe. The silent observer continued its journey to the next star system, leaving Earth far behind. None of the aliens suspected that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The human DNA samples were now in their computer, and the deep analysis was beginning. On Earth, life continued as normal. Jake Martinez and his team brought the strange metal pieces back to their lab to study them. Lisa Shaw filed her report about the energy readings, though no one believed her. Ben Torres went back to his job as a park ranger, never knowing that he had been taken by aliens. But something had changed. The aliens' medical scans had touched something deep inside human DNA, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Soon, that something would begin to wake up, and when it did, the entire galaxy would never be the same again.